Previously, on A2823103, a cut above, we discovered that his name was George Henry Bryant, born in Sydney on May 9th, 1837. He later moved to Kelso near Bathurst with his family, before then relocating to the gold mining town of Hargraves after his parents separated. It is then that he met and married Mary Ann Petrie, presumably while working as a butcher for Mary's father, John Petrie. As the economy in Hargraves declined due to the waning gold mining industry, George and Mary, along with their 4 young children, followed the prospectors further south to the newly discovered Rich Reef mining area, then known as the Bald Hills, but would later famously be known as Hill End. It was here in Hill End where George established his first butcher shop. But it was soon realised that this establishment would not be adequate enough. George was advertising his Great Western Meat Mart with every description of small goods in the Hill End and Tambaroora Times from September to April of 1872. But as mentioned, this rented premises was beginning to prove inadequate for his growing business. Fortunately, George managed to save enough capital to now purchase his own land. He hoped that this investment would grow his business, but it also was to be an investment for the future, to provide a home for his growing family. So, the hunt was on. Moses Bell, who was a shareholder in Holtermann and Buyers Star of Hope Mine, owned allotment 10 along the southernmost eastern side of Clark Street and on the corner of Church Street. Bell subdivided the land into 3 sections: allotment 5, 10, and 6. George saw the opportunity and quickly snapped up part of lot 10 for £5, 10 and 7. Or about $9.79 in today's money. So, George packed up his equipment and his family and walked about 500 metres down from the old shop in Tambaroora Street, or Byers Avenue as we now know it, to allotment 10 on Clark Street. For those familiar with the topographical overview of Hill End will understand this location, and it is here where George erected his second butcher shop. In comparison, you are probably of the opinion that the first shop was possibly a much superior dwelling. However, George would later build upon this store, where it would eventually become a sound and sturdy, purposely built butcher shop that would later stand the test of time. And with this new development, the colour within, George Henry Bryant continues to materialise, and along with it, his butcher shop titled A2822438. 4 men outside G.H. Bryant's butcher shop, a slab building with corrugated iron roof and carcasses hanging from meat hooks on the front wall. Clark Street, Hill End, New South Wales. It's difficult to know which of the 4 men pictured is actually George Bryant. There are suggestions that the taller of the men holding the knife is George. However, As this picture of the shop was taken roughly at about the same time as his portrait, the two men do not bear any real resemblances. Chris is of the opinion that George is more likely to be the gentleman immediately to the left of the taller man. What do you think? The view you see here is of the bottom end of Clark Street at the corner of Church Street. The picture is taken from in front of Bryant's Butcher, showing allotment 6 on the left, and the last allotment of land on Clark Street, owned by Moses Bell. Moses owned and operated a hotel on this site during the early 1870s. However, he later sold the hotel to Alexander Steele, where it then became known as Steele's Hotel. The corner of Clark and Church Street where the hotel stood was known as Steele's Corner, a name that it is still known as until this day. Although the hotel no longer exists, the foundations and the remnants of the cellar still remain. In this section of the panorama taken of Hill End, and if you look close enough, you will see Bryant's and Steele's Hotel, but it also captures Benjamin Hall's Star of Hope Hotel to the left of Bryant's Butcher. This is that hotel, and if you look even closer, you will notice the gentleman butcher, thought to be George Bryant, photo-bombing the pub. You can also see a glimpse of the neighbouring butcher shop on the right. During the period of the A&A Photographic Studio's time in Hill End, 1872 to 1873, the photographer, Beaufoy Merlin, took possibly thousands of portraits, and while many still survive today, there has likely been many more that have been lost. It is remarkable that some of the Bryants were among the portraits that have survived. But what is more remarkable is that the entire family that existed between 1872 and 1873 were all photographed. It is very rare that entire families still exist in the collection, and the amazing thing is that all the Bryants' portraits have all survived. While there were at least 3 Bryant families residing in Hill End between 1872 and 1873 when the pictures were taken, we can be confident that all the children were the sons and daughters of George and Mary, as the descriptions on the reverse sides of the plates match all their names perfectly. But what about Mary herself? As we can see, 2 of the 3 Bryants living at Hill End at the time were married, with the third, James Bryant, either not married or not identified. As this portrait is simply identified as just Mrs. Bryant, it could actually be of George's wife Mary, or possibly the painter John Bryant's wife Elizabeth, or even the unidentified wife of the miner James Bryant. We can actually confirm that the woman in this portrait is Mary Ann Bryant, and the proof can be found in one tiny little detail contained within this photograph. Can you see it? Women's fashion during the 1800s was very elegant, to say the least. Everything from long flowing layers of dresses trimmed with delicate lace to elaborate hairpieces and colourful ribbons and hairnets. They also wore low-hanging jewellery, such as long gold necklaces and dangling earrings, and most wore large brooches that were tightly buttoned at the neck. These brooches were mostly oval in shape and framed by gold or delicate gemstones. They were often engraved with a silhouette of a beautiful woman, or maybe even a photograph. If you take a closer look at the brooch worn by this Mrs. Bryant, you can see it does have a photograph. And if you look even closer again, you will notice it is of a man, which in turn bears a striking resemblance to George Henry Bryant. Now with the Bryant family all back together again, George is further injected with more of the colour that has been missing in him for over 150 years. Between the years of 1862 and 1871, a total of 9 years, George and Mary have had 5 children, and this happy little family appears to be now complete. Well, almost. Stay tuned for part 3 of George Henry Bryant, A Cut Above, and the rise of Athol. Thanks for watching.